Hi, my name's Elena. And if you've ever been called worthless at your own sister's wedding, if you've ever watched your parents shower praise on the golden child while treating you like hired help, then maybe you'll understand what it felt like to hear my mother announce to 300 guests that I'd never amount to anything. But what they didn't know was that the elegant venue they'd chosen for their perfect daughter's perfect day, I owned every marble tile, every crystal chandelier, and every deed to the property they thought was too good for someone like me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of Sophia's wedding started like every other family gathering in the Martinez household, with me being invisible until someone needed something done. I stood in the kitchen of our family home in Coral Gables, pressing my sister's veil with the kind of careful attention I'd learned to give everything that mattered to everyone else. The steam rose from the iron in gentle puffs, and I watched each wrinkle disappear under the heat, wishing I could smooth away the tension in my chest just as easily. Elena, are you almost finished with that? My mother, Carmen, swept into the kitchen wearing a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was already perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite it being only 8 in the morning. She didn't look at me as she spoke, instead checking her reflection in the chrome surface of the refrigerator. "Almost done, Mommy," I replied, softly, running the iron over a particularly stubborn crease near the cathedral-length edge. The veil was stunning, French lace with hand-sewn pearls that caught the morning light streaming through the kitchen window. It was the kind of veil that belonged in magazines, the kind that cost as much as a car. Everything about Sophia's wedding was like that. Perfect, expensive, worthy of the family name. Good. Make sure you're careful with it. That veil is irreplaceable. It belonged to your great-grandmother. Carmen finally turned to look at me, her dark eyes scanning my appearance with the kind of criticism I'd grown accustomed to. "And please tell me you're not planning to wear that to the ceremony." I glanced down at my simple black dress. It was modest, appropriate, the kind of dress that wouldn't draw attention or upstage anyone. "What's wrong with it?" "Elena, this is your sister's wedding, not a funeral. Can't you try to look, I don't know, more put together? More like you belong in this family?" She sighed dramatically. The same sigh she'd been perfecting since I was 12 and failed to make the honor roll like Sophia had every semester, since kindergarten. The iron hissed as I set it down, unplugging it from the wall. 28 years old, and my mother still spoke to me like I was a disappointing child who couldn't dress herself properly. "I'll change into something else," I said, because arguing with Carmen Martinez was like trying to hold back the tide with your bare hands. Exhausting and ultimately pointless. "That would be wise. We can't have you looking." She paused, searching for the right words. "Well, you know how you can look sometimes." I knew exactly how I looked sometimes. Plain. Unremarkable. The kind of person who blended into the background at family photos, who got cropped out of holiday cards, who existed somewhere between an afterthought and a mild inconvenience. I'd been looking that way my entire life, according to Carmen. Footsteps thundered down the stairs, followed by Sophia's melodic laughter. Even her laugh was perfect. Not too loud, not too soft, just the right pitch to make everyone around her smile involuntarily. She appeared in the kitchen doorway like a vision in her silk robe, her honey-blonde hair flowing in waves down her back, her skin glowing with the kind of radiance that comes from expensive facials and a lifetime of being told you're beautiful. "Is my veil ready?" she asked, but she was looking at Carmen, not at me. To Sophia, I wasn't the person who'd spent an hour carefully steaming every inch of delicate lace. I was just part of the furniture, something that happened to be holding what she needed. "Elena just finished it," Carmen said, taking the veil from my hands and presenting it to Sophia like an offering. "Doesn't it look beautiful?" Sophia examined it with the critical eye of someone accustomed to perfection. "It's fine," she said finally, which in Sophia speak meant it met her impossibly high standards. Though I noticed there's still a tiny wrinkle near the hem. I looked where she was pointing. There was no wrinkle. The veil was flawless. But I'd learned long ago that pointing out facts to Sophia was like speaking a foreign language she'd never bothered to learn. "I'll take care of it," I said quietly. "Good. I knew I could count on you." Sophia's smile was radiant and completely empty. "You're so good at fixing things, taking care of the details nobody else wants to handle." The kitchen filled with the sound of her phone buzzing. She glanced at it, and her smile became genuine for the first time that morning. "Marcus is already at the venue doing the final walkthrough with the wedding planner. He says Villa Esperanza looks like something out of a fairy tale." Villa Esperanza. The name sent a familiar flutter through my chest, the same feeling I got every time someone mentioned the estate without knowing its history, without knowing how I'd found it abandoned and forgotten 5 years ago, how I'd spent every weekend for 2 years restoring it with my own hands, how I'd poured my life savings and my heart into bringing it back to life. "Villa Esperanza is gorgeous," Carmen agreed, settling into one of the kitchen chairs with her coffee. "When Sophia told us she wanted to get married there, I was worried it would be too expensive. But the owner was so accommodating about the price, almost like they were desperate for the business." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I kept my face carefully neutral, focusing on folding the veil with precise movements. The accommodating price my mother referred to was actually the family discount I'd given them, not that they knew I was the one giving it. They thought they'd simply been lucky enough to book the most sought-after wedding venue in South Florida for half its usual rate. "The pictures Marcus sent are incredible," Sophia continued, scrolling through her phone. "The garden, ceremony space, the ballroom, the fountains. Everything is just perfect. I can't believe we found such an amazing place." "You didn't find it," I thought. "I found it. I saved it. I turned it into the place you're about to call perfect." But saying that would require explaining things I wasn't ready to explain, revealing truths I wasn't sure they were ready to hear. "Elena, you should see these photos," Sophia said suddenly, thrusting her phone toward me. "Maybe you'll get some inspiration for when you finally find someone willing to marry you." The comment landed like a small, precise cut, not deep enough to be dramatic, just sharp enough to sting. Sophia had a gift for that kind of observation, the backhanded compliment that sounded almost kind if you weren't listening carefully. I looked at the photos anyway. The images showed Villa Esperanza in the golden hour light of late afternoon, when the sun filtered through the ancient oak trees and made everything look like a Renaissance painting. The ceremony space I'd designed was set up with white chairs, arranged in a perfect semicircle around the marble fountain I'd spent months restoring. The reception ballroom gleamed with the crystal chandeliers I'd painstakingly cleaned and rewired myself. "It's beautiful," I said, and meant it. Villa Esperanza was beautiful. It was my masterpiece, my refuge, my secret. And in 3 hours, 300 people would gather there to celebrate my sister's perfect life, without knowing that the woman serving them champagne and fading into the background was the reason they had such a magical place to celebrate in. "The owner must have incredible taste," Carmen mused, leaning over to look at the photos. "Everything is so elegant, so sophisticated. You can tell this place was designed by someone who really understands luxury." I understood luxury the way people understand languages they've studied but never spoken fluently. I'd learned it through observation, through years of watching my family move through spaces and experiences that were always just slightly beyond my reach. When I'd restored Villa Esperanza, I'd channeled every beautiful room I'd ever admired from the outside, every elegant event I'd attended as an afterthought. I wonder what the owner is like, Sophia said dreamily. Probably some elegant older woman with incredible style. Maybe she's European. Or one of those sophisticated Miami socialites who inherited family money. If she only knew. The owner was her younger sister, who'd learned about elegant spaces from being excluded from them, who'd developed sophisticated taste from years of watching from the margins, who'd bought the property with money earned from working 3 jobs, while Sophia was in graduate school on the family's dime. "We should probably start getting ready," Carmen announced, standing and smoothing her dress. "The photographer will be here soon, and you know how I feel about being rushed." Sophia nodded, but she was still scrolling through the photos of the venue. "I just can't get over how perfect this place is. It's like it was designed specifically for my wedding." In a way, it was. Every choice I'd made while restoring Villa Esperanza had been influenced by dreams of the kind of celebration I thought I'd never have. The romantic garden spaces, the intimate alcoves, the grand ballroom that could hold a crowd but still felt warm and personal. I designed it all for the kind of wedding I'd fantasized about during the years when everyone assumed I'd never find anyone to marry me. "Elena, can you handle the final details here while we go get our hair touched up?" Carmen asked, though it wasn't really a question. It was the same tone she'd used when I was 16, and she'd asked me to watch Sophia's car while they went shopping together. "Of course," I said automatically. "Great. Make sure the flowers for the boutonnieres are properly arranged, and can you double-check that we have enough programs printed? I want everything to be perfect for Sophia's day." Perfect for Sophia's day. Not perfect for the wedding, not perfect for the celebration. Perfect for Sophia, as if the entire event existed solely for her benefit, and the rest of us were just supporting players in her personal fairy tale. They left me alone in the kitchen with a list of tasks that would take at least 2 hours to complete properly. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 8:47 a.m. The ceremony started at 3, which meant I had 6 hours to finish everything on Carmen's list, get myself ready, and somehow transform from the family's unpaid wedding coordinator into a guest who belonged at the celebration. I started with the boutonnieres, carefully pinning each white rose to its backing and arranging them in the refrigerator to stay fresh. The roses were perfect, not a bruised petal or imperfect bloom among them. Everything about Sophia's wedding was like that. Flawless, expensive, worthy of being photographed and admired and remembered forever. As I worked, I found myself thinking about my own dreams of getting married. Not the elaborate fantasies most girls had, but the quiet hope that someday someone would see me as worth celebrating. That someday I'd be the one wearing white, walking down an aisle towards someone who looked at me the way Marcus looked at Sophia, like I was the most incredible thing they'd ever seen. Those dreams had faded over the years, worn away by 1,000 small comments about my prospects, my appearance, my general inability to be the kind of woman men noticed. But they hadn't disappeared entirely. They'd just changed form, transformed into something more practical. Instead of dreaming about my own wedding, I'd channeled that energy into creating Villa Esperanza, into building the perfect place for other people's perfect days. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd created the venue of Sophia's dreams while convincing myself I'd never need one. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel, my assistant manager at the venue. "Everything looks perfect for the Martinez wedding. Flowers delivered, tables set, staff briefed. You sure you don't want to oversee the final setup?" I typed back quickly. "You've got this. I'll be there as a guest today." Miguel was one of the few people who knew I owned Villa Esperanza. He'd been working weddings and events in Miami for 15 years when I'd hired him, and he'd never once asked why the 23-year-old daughter of a prominent family was buying and restoring a historical estate with her own money. He just helped me make it beautiful and kept my secrets without being asked. "Guest of honor?" he replied with a laughing emoji. "Something like that," I wrote back, though we both knew better. I finished the boutonnieres and moved on to the programs checking each one for typos and making sure they were properly folded. Sophia's program was a work of art. Thick cream cardstock with gold foil lettering and a custom monogram she'd had designed by a graphic artist in New York. The order of service was printed in elegant script, every detail perfect down to the readings they'd chosen and the musicians they'd hired. Looking at the program, you'd never guess that half the wedding party barely tolerated each other, or that Marcus's family thought Sophia was too high maintenance, or that the bride had changed her mind about the menu 4 times in the last month. You'd never know that the maid of honor was Sophia's college roommate, who'd once told me at a family barbecue that she couldn't understand how Sophia and I were related since we were so different. Different. That was the polite way people described the gap between my sister and me. Sophia was tall where I was average height, blonde where I was brunette, effortlessly charming where I was quietly observant. She was the kind of person who walked into rooms and immediately became the center of attention, while I was the kind of person who could stand in a corner for an entire party without anyone noticing I was there. The differences went deeper than appearance, though. Sophia saw the world as a place designed for her comfort and success. I saw it as a place where comfort and success had to be earned, usually through work that nobody noticed or appreciated until it was missing. I checked the clock again, 10:15 a.m. Carmen and Sophia would be at the salon for at least 2 hours, which gave me time to handle the rest of their list and maybe steal a few minutes to make myself presentable for the wedding. I'd brought a different dress, a soft blue number that Carmen would probably still find fault with, but that made me feel less like I was attending a funeral. The photographer arrived while I was arranging the bridal party flowers, an energetic woman named Lisa, who immediately started setting up elaborate lighting equipment in the living room. She barely glanced at me as I worked around her, clearly categorizing me as part of the help rather than part of the family. "Are you the wedding coordinator?" she asked, adjusting a massive umbrella light. "No, just the sister," I said. She looked surprised, taking in my simple jeans and t-shirt, my hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. You'll be in the family photos, right?" "I think so," I said, though I knew better. Family photos in the Martinez household had a way of being taken when I was in the bathroom or handling some last-minute crisis. I'd learned to stop expecting to be included in the pictures that would hang on walls and fill albums for years to come. Lisa nodded and went back to her equipment, clearly dismissing me as not particularly important to the day's narrative. I was used to that reaction. People saw what they expected to see, and what they expected to see when they looked at me was someone ordinary, someone forgettable, someone who existed to make other people's lives run more smoothly. But today was going to be different. Today, for the first time in my life, I was going to let them see exactly who I really was. Not the helpful sister, not the reliable daughter, not the woman who faded into the background while others shone. Today they were going to learn that the person they'd overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed owned the very ground they were standing on. I just had to get through the next few hours first. The salon was buzzing with the kind of controlled chaos that only happened when wealthy women were preparing for important events. I sat in the corner chair, watching Sophia get the full princess treatment. Hair extensions, professional makeup, manicured nails that gleamed like tiny mirrors. Carmen held court nearby, directing the stylists like a general commanding troops, making sure every detail met her exacting standards. "Elena, they can squeeze you in for a quick blowout if you want," Sophia called over the noise of hairdryers and chattering stylists. Her tone was generous, the way people sound when they're offering charity to someone they pity. "I'm fine," I said, running my fingers through my own hair. I'd learned to do my own makeup years ago, taught myself by watching YouTube tutorials. In my tiny apartment while Sophia was getting professional treatments paid for by our parents. I don't need much. Carmen looked over from where she was supervising Sophia's makeup artist. "Elena, sweetheart, this is your sister's wedding day. The photos will last forever. Don't you want to look your best?" There it was, the gentle implication that my best required professional intervention, that without help, I'd somehow embarrass the family in the inevitable photographs. I'd heard variations of this my entire life. The suggestion that I needed fixing, improving, upgrading to be worthy of standing next to them. "I brought my own makeup," I said quietly. "I'll be fine." The makeup artist, a woman named Valentina, with perfectly sculpted eyebrows and lips that could sell lipstick ads, glanced at me sympathetically. "If you change your mind, I have some extra time after I finish with the bride." I nodded my thanks, but I could see the look that passed between Carmen and Sophia. The look that said I was being difficult again, stubborn in that quietly disappointing way they'd come to expect from me. They couldn't understand that I didn't want their help because I'd learned that accepting it always came with a price. The reminder that I needed it, that I wasn't naturally beautiful or polished or worthy enough on my own. While they transformed Sophia into a magazine-worthy bride, I stepped outside to take a phone call from Miguel. The morning sun was already warm against my skin, promising the kind of perfect Florida day that made wedding photographers weep with joy. "Elena, I hate to bother you, but we've got a small situation." Miguel's voice was calm but concerned. "The bride's family just called asking if we can accommodate 15 additional guests. Apparently, some relatives flew in unexpectedly from Spain." I leaned against the salon's brick wall, calculating quickly. "We can set up an extra table in the corner of the ballroom near the windows. Use the round table from storage and dress it with the backup linens. Make sure the catering knows about the additional plates." "Already on it, but here's the thing. They want to know if there's an extra charge for the addition." I almost laughed. Carmen had spent the morning complaining about the cost of everything from the flowers to the photographer, but she'd never hesitated to add expenses when it came to making Sophia's day perfect. "No charge. It's family." "You sure? That's a significant addition to the final bill." "I'm sure." What Miguel didn't know was that I'd been absorbing costs for this wedding for months. The discounted rate my parents thought they'd negotiated was actually me paying for nearly half of my sister's wedding out of my own pocket. Every upgrade Sophia had requested, every last-minute change, every addition to make her day more perfect, I'd covered it all silently, invisibly, the way I'd been covering for my family's expectations my entire life. "All right, boss. We'll handle it. The venue looks incredible, by the way. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen the ballroom look more beautiful." I smiled despite myself. Villa Esperanza was beautiful, especially today. I'd spent the early morning hours there before coming to help with wedding preparations, making sure every detail was perfect. The garden ceremony space was draped with white silk and climbing jasmine, the fountain surrounded by hundreds of white roses and baby's breath. The ballroom gleamed with the crystal chandeliers I'd restored myself, each table set with gold chargers and centerpieces of white orchids and eucalyptus. "Thanks, Miguel. I'll see you this afternoon." "As a guest, right? You promised you'd actually enjoy yourself today instead of working." "As a guest," I confirmed, though I knew myself well enough to know I'd probably end up helping with something before the night was over. It was what I did. Notice problems and fix them before anyone else even realized they existed. When I went back inside the salon, Sophia's transformation was nearly complete. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, all golden hair and luminous skin, and the kind of beauty that made people stop mid-sentence when she walked into a room. The wedding dress waited on a nearby hanger, a custom creation from a designer in New York that had cost more than I'd made in 6 months at my first job. "Elena, come look at your sister," Carmen called, her voice thick with maternal pride. "Doesn't she look absolutely stunning?" Sophia did look stunning. She always looked stunning. Even on her worst days, she possessed the kind of effortless beauty that other women spent fortunes trying to achieve. But today, Surrounded by the soft lighting and professional artistry of the salon, she looked like something out of a dream. "You look beautiful," I told her and meant it. Whatever complicated feelings I had about my sister, I'd never been able to deny that she was genuinely lovely to look at. "Thank you," Sophia said, studying herself in the mirror with the critical eye of someone accustomed to perfection. "Though I'm worried about the humidity. What if my hair falls flat during the ceremony?" Valentina, the makeup artist, jumped in immediately. "I used the strongest setting spray we have, and the hairstylist added extra bobby pins. You'll be perfect all day." "But what if it rains?" Sophia continued, her voice rising slightly. "The weather app said there's a 15% chance of scattered showers this afternoon." Carmen moved to Sophia's side immediately, rubbing her shoulders in soothing circles. "Sweetheart, it's not going to rain. And even if it did, Villa Esperanza has covered areas. The wedding planner has backup plans for everything." I bit my tongue to keep from mentioning that I was the one who'd insisted on multiple covered spaces when designing the venue's event areas, precisely because Florida weather was unpredictable. Instead, I pulled out my phone and checked the radar. "The weather looks clear all afternoon. You don't need to worry." But Sophia was in full bride mode now, the kind of pre-wedding anxiety that made everything feel like a potential catastrophe. What if Marcus is late? What if his family doesn't like the food? What if the flowers wilt? What if the photographer doesn't get good shots? "Sophia, breathe," Carmen said firmly. "Everything is going to be perfect. You've planned every detail. Elena has been helping with all the little things. There's nothing to worry about." The casual way Carmen dismissed my contributions as helping with little things stung more than it should have. I'd coordinated with 17 different vendors, handled 3 separate crises with the catering, personally delivered the wedding favors when the original delivery fell through, and spent my own money to upgrade half the details Sophia had originally settled for. But to Carmen, it was just helping with little things. "You're right," Sophia said, her breathing returning to normal. "Everything will be perfect. And Elena, thank you for handling all the details this morning. I know I can always count on you to take care of the things I don't have time for." There it was again, the assumption that my time was less valuable, that my role in life was to handle the tasks that were beneath Sophia's attention. I'd been hearing variations of this my entire life. Elena will take care of it. Elena doesn't mind. Elena is so good at handling the boring stuff. "It's fine," I said automatically, the same response I'd been giving for 28 years. "You're such a good sister," Carmen added, patting my hand absently. "Always so dependable. So practical." Dependable. Practical. The words that followed me everywhere, the gentle way of saying unremarkable, forgettable, useful, but not valuable. I was the sister who could be counted on to handle logistics while Sophia got to be the star of the show. My phone buzzed with another text from Miguel. "Catering wants to confirm the timeline for cocktail service. Should I handle it, or do you want to talk to them?" I typed back quickly, "Handle it. I trust your judgment." "Problem?" Carmen asked, noticing me on the phone. "Just venue stuff. Miguel has it under control." "Miguel?" Sophia looked confused. "Who's Miguel?" "The venue coordinator at Villa Esperanza," I said carefully. "He's been our main contact for all the wedding logistics." "Oh, right. He's been so helpful. Though I still can't believe we got such a good deal on that place. It's supposed to be one of the most exclusive venues in South Florida." If only she knew. The good deal she couldn't believe was me sacrificing most of my profit margin to give my sister the wedding of her dreams. The exclusive venue she was so impressed by was the result of 5 years of my blood, sweat, and tears, turning an abandoned estate into something magical. "Some people are just generous," I said quietly. "Or desperate for the business," Carmen added with a laugh. "Either way, we got lucky." Lucky. They thought they'd gotten lucky. Not that their often overlooked daughter had used every skill she'd developed and every connection she'd made to give them something extraordinary. Not that the woman they saw as practical and dependable had created something beautiful enough to host their perfect daughter's perfect day. Just lucky. The hairstylist finished the final touches on Sophia's updo, securing it with a diamond hair clip that had belonged to our grandmother. "All done," she announced, stepping back to admire her work. Sophia stood and moved to the full-length mirror, studying herself from every angle. The transformation was complete. She looked like a bride from a high-end magazine, the kind of woman who belonged in marble ballrooms and crystal-adorned celebrations. "Perfect," she breathed, then turned to Carmen. "Mom, can you get some photos of me before we head to the venue?" Carmen immediately started arranging an impromptu photo shoot, directing Sophia to pose by the window near the flower arrangements, anywhere the light was flattering. I stood to the side, watching them work together with the kind of easy collaboration that came from years of mutual admiration. "Elena, can you take some photos of me and Mom together?" Sophia asked, holding out her phone. I became the photographer, capturing image after image of their radiant smiles, their easy affection, their obvious pride in this moment. Through the camera lens, they looked like the perfect mother and daughter, united in their joy and excitement for the day ahead. "Can you get one of all three of us?" Carmen asked finally. But even as she said it, I could see her hesitation. The calculation of whether including me would somehow diminish the beauty of the photos she'd want to frame and display. "Of course," I said, setting up the camera timer and positioning myself slightly behind them, in the spot where I'd learned to stand for family photos, close enough to be included, far enough back to be easily cropped out if needed. The timer clicked, capturing what would probably be the only photo of the three of us from Sophia's wedding day. Later, when Carmen chose which pictures to print and frame, I had a feeling this wouldn't make the cut. "We should head to the venue soon," Carmen announced, checking her watch. "The photographer wants to start the getting ready shots at noon, and we still need to get Sophia into her dress." The venue, my venue. In less than an hour, I'd walk into Villa Esperanza not as its owner and creator, but as the forgettable sister of the bride. I'd watch 300 guests admire the space I'd designed, eat food prepared in the kitchen I'd renovated, dance under chandeliers I'd restored with my own hands, all while having no idea that the quiet woman in the corner had made their magical evening possible. But that was about to change. Because today, for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to fade into the background. Today, they were going to see exactly who I really was. I just had to wait for the right moment. As we gathered, our things to leave for Villa Esperanza, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my grandmother's number, Abuela Rosa, who lived in a retirement community in Aventura and had been the only person in my family who'd ever seemed to truly see me. "Mija," her warm voice filled my ear when I answered. "How are you holding up today?" "I'm fine, Abuela, just getting ready to head to the venue." "To your venue," she corrected gently. Rosa was one of the only people who knew the truth about Villa Esperanza. She'd been the one to lend me the down payment when the bank initially rejected my loan application, the one who'd encouraged me to follow my dreams even when everyone else thought I was being impractical. "To the venue," I repeated carefully, glancing around to make sure Carmen and Sophia weren't listening. "Elena, I want you to remember something today. You have built something beautiful. You have accomplished something remarkable. Don't let anyone make you forget that, not even family." Her words wrapped around me like a warm hug. "Thank you, Abuela. And Elena, your grandfather would be proud of you. He always said you had the strongest spirit of all his grandchildren, even if you were the quietest about it." After she hung up, I stood in the salon parking lot for a moment, letting her words settle in my chest. Abuela Rosa had always been different from the rest of the family. She saw strength where others saw stubbornness, vision where others saw impracticality, determination where others saw quiet compliance. Elena, are you coming? Carmen called from the car. We need to get moving. I climbed into the back seat, listening to Sophia and Carmen chatter excitedly about the day ahead. They talked about the ceremony, the reception, the photos, the dancing. They talked about Marcus's family, the flowers, the food, the music. They talked about everything except the venue itself, as if Villa Esperanza was just a beautiful backdrop that had materialized out of thin air for their convenience. As we drove through Coral Gables toward the venue, I thought about all the weekends I'd spent there over the past 5 years. The day I'd first seen the property, abandoned and overgrown, with broken windows and a fountain filled with stagnant water. The months I'd spent learning about historical restoration, about event planning, about the 1,000 tiny details that went into creating magical experiences for other people. I thought about the nights I'd stayed late replastering walls and refinishing floors, the mornings I'd spent researching the estate's history and tracking down period-appropriate fixtures. I thought about the first event I'd hosted, a small anniversary party for 50 guests, and how proud I'd felt watching people fall in love with the space I'd created. But mostly, I thought about this afternoon, when 300 people would gather to celebrate my sister's perfect life in the space I'd built with my own hands, and none of them would know that the woman serving champagne and fading into the background was the reason they had such a magical place to celebrate. That was about to change. The first glimpse of Villa Esperanza through the car window always took my breath away. But today, it felt different. Today I was seeing it through my family's eyes, as guests discovering it for the first time, rather than as the woman who'd spent 5 years pouring her soul into every restored detail. The iron gate stood open, flanked by towering royal palms I'd personally selected and planted. The circular driveway curved gracefully toward the main building, a 1920s Mediterranean revival mansion that glowed golden in the afternoon sun. "My God," Carmen breathed, pressing her face to the window. "It's even more beautiful than the photos." Sophia was practically bouncing in her seat. Marcus was right. It really does look like something from a fairy tale. "Elena, can you believe we get to have the wedding here?" I could believe it because I'd designed every inch of this fairy tale specifically for moments like this. The sweeping staircase that led to the main entrance, the fountain that served as the ceremony's centerpiece, the terraced gardens that provided intimate spaces for photos. All of it had been carefully planned to create exactly the sense of wonder I was watching on their faces. "It's incredible," I said softly, which was perhaps the greatest understatement of my life. As our car pulled up to the main entrance, I spotted Miguel directing a team of staff members who were putting the finishing touches on the ceremony setup. He caught my eye through the window and gave me the subtlest of nods. Everything was ready. The months of planning, the countless vendor meetings, the detailed timelines we'd created together were all coming together perfectly. Lisa, the photographer, was already here, capturing establishing shots of the venue. I watched her work, knowing she was documenting my creation without realizing it. Later, when these photos appeared in wedding magazines and social media posts, people would admire the elegant architecture and romantic ambiance, never knowing that a 28-year-old woman with a vision and an unshakable work ethic had saved this place from demolition. "The bridal suite is on the 2nd floor," I told Carmen and Sophia as we climbed out of the car. "Miguel will show you the way." "How do you know about the bridal suite?" Sophia asked, looking at me curiously. "I asked when I was coordinating." "Some of the details," I said carefully. The truth was that I'd designed the bridal suite myself, transforming what had once been the estate's master bedroom into a perfect space for brides to prepare for their ceremonies. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, antique furniture provided elegant seating areas, and a vintage vanity with professional lighting made for perfect getting-ready photos. Miguel appeared at our side, impeccably dressed in his black suit. "Ms. Martinez?" he said, greeting Sophia with the warm professionalism that made him so good at his job. Welcome to Villa Esperanza. I'm Miguel, and I'll be coordinating all the details for your celebration today. Thank you so much, Sophia gushed. This place is absolutely magical. Elena was just telling us about the bridal suite. Miguel's eyes flicked to me for the briefest moment before his professional smile returned. Of course. Right this way, ladies. As we walked through the main entrance, I watched Carmen and Sophia take in the restoration work I'd spent 2 years completing. The original terrazzo floors had been meticulously repaired and polished until they gleamed like mirrors. The hand-painted ceiling murals, which had been covered by decades of white paint when I'd bought the property, had been painstakingly restored by a team of specialists I'd found in Italy. The grand staircase's wrought iron railings, which I'd personally stripped and refinished, curved elegantly toward the second floor. Elena, look at this chandelier, Carmen called out, stopping beneath the massive crystal fixture that dominated the entrance hall. I've never seen anything like it. I'd never seen anything like it either, until I'd found it in pieces in the estate's basement, covered in dust and missing half its crystals. It had taken me 6 months to track down matching replacement pieces and another 3 months to learn how to properly clean and reassemble the entire fixture. Now it hung like a jeweled crown, casting rainbow prisms across the restored walls. It's original to the house, I said, which was technically true, even if I was the one who'd brought it back to life. The bridal suite was everything I'd hoped it would be when I'd designed it. Sophia gasped when Miguel opened the door, revealing the spacious room with its romantic decor and perfect lighting. Her wedding dress hung on a custom stand near the windows, looking like something from a magazine spread. This is perfect, she breathed, moving immediately to the vanity mirror. The lighting is incredible. Lisa is going to get amazing photos in here. Lisa, who had followed us upstairs, was already setting up her equipment. The natural light in here is a photographer's dream, she agreed. Whoever designed this space really understood how to create the perfect bridal preparation room. I understood because I'd been dreaming about the perfect bridal preparation room since I was a little girl, imagining what it would feel like to get ready for the most important day of my life in a space designed for pure magic. When those dreams had seemed increasingly unlikely to come true for me personally, I'd channeled that energy into creating the space for other brides instead. Elena, can you help me with my dress? Sophia asked, already moving toward the garment, hanging by the window. For the next hour, I helped my sister transform into a bride while trying not to think about the irony of the situation. Every detail of this room, from the antique settee where Carmen sat watching, to the full-length mirror where Sophia admired herself, to the crystal chandelier that cast perfect light for photographs, had been chosen and placed by me. Yet, here I was, serving as an assistant in the space I'd created, invisible as always despite being surrounded by my own vision made manifest. The dress was stunning, a custom creation that hugged Sophia's curves perfectly before flowing into a dramatic train. As I fastened the dozens of tiny buttons that ran up her back, I could hear Lisa's camera clicking constantly, capturing every moment of the preparation process. "Can you fix this piece of lace?" Sophia asked, pointing to a section near her hip. "It's not laying flat." I adjusted the delicate fabric, making sure it fell perfectly. Everything about Sophia's appearance had to be flawless, not just because she was naturally perfectionist, but because she'd grown up knowing that perfection was expected of her. She was the daughter who'd always been beautiful, talented, successful, the one who'd never had to wonder if she was worthy of attention and admiration. "There," I said, stepping back to admire the final result. "You look incredible." And she did. In her custom dress, with her professional makeup and perfect hair, surrounded by the romantic elegance of the bridal suite, Sophia looked like every bride's dream version of herself. She was radiant, confident, completely at home in a space designed for celebrating love and new beginnings. "Elena, we need to get some photos of you with the bride," Lisa said suddenly, turning her camera toward me. "Family getting ready shots. are always beautiful. I felt suddenly self-conscious in my simple blue dress, my hair that I'd styled myself, my makeup that had come from a drugstore palette rather than a professional artist. Next to Sophia's bridal perfection, I felt like exactly what I was, the practical sister who handled logistics while others got to be beautiful. Maybe later, I said quickly. I should check on things downstairs. Elena, don't be silly, Carmen intervened. You're part of this family. You should be in the photos. But even as she said it, I could see the calculation in her eyes. Would, including me, somehow diminish the perfection of the shots she wanted to frame and display? Would my ordinary appearance next to Sophia's bridal radiance create the kind of contrast that highlighted what she saw as my deficiencies? Just a few quick shots, Lisa said, already adjusting her camera settings. Stand next to your sister. I moved to Sophia's side, trying to smile naturally while feeling completely out of place in my own creation. Through the lens, we probably looked like exactly what we were, the perfect daughter and the practical one, beauty and usefulness standing side by side in a room designed for dreams. Beautiful, Lisa murmured, capturing shot after shot. The light in here is just incredible. Whoever designed this room really knew what they were doing. After the photos, I excused myself to check on the ceremony preparations, leaving Carmen and Sophia to continue their pre-wedding bonding in the bridal suite. Walking through Villa Esperanza as a guest felt surreal, like being a tourist in my own home, admiring my own work from the outside. The garden ceremony space looked like something from a magazine. White silk draping fluttered gently in the ocean breeze. The restored fountain sparkled in the afternoon sun, and hundreds of white roses created a romantic border around the seating area. Guests were already beginning to arrive, elegant women, in flowing dresses and men in perfectly tailored suits, all admiring the venue that had brought them together for this celebration. I spotted Marcus near the altar, adjusting his tie nervously while his groomsmen tried to calm his pre-ceremony jitters. He looked handsome in his black tuxedo, the kind of man who belonged with someone like Sophia, successful, confident, comfortable in spaces like this. "Elena!" Marcus called out when he saw me, walking over with obvious relief. "Thank God you're here. Do you know if there's somewhere I can get a glass of water? I'm dying of thirst and I don't want to mess up my makeup before the photos." Even Marcus, who'd known me for 3 years, automatically assumed I was there to handle problems and fetch things. It wasn't malicious. It was just the role I'd always played in the family dynamic, the one who took care of details so everyone else could focus on being important. "The staff can get you anything you need," I said gently. "Just ask Miguel. He's the tall man in the black suit by the fountain." "Right, of course. Thanks." Marcus paused, looking around at the venue with obvious appreciation. "This place really is incredible, isn't it? Sophia told me you helped coordinate a lot of the details. Thank you for that. I know how much this day means to her." Helped coordinate. Even Marcus, who'd been nothing but kind to me, saw my role as assistance rather than creation. I was the sister who helped make things happen, not the woman who'd made this entire magical setting possible. "It was my pleasure," I said, which was both completely true and completely inadequate to describe what Villa Esperanza meant to me. As Marcus walked away to find Miguel, my phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother. "Mija, I'm watching the ceremony livestream that Sophia set up. The venue looks absolutely beautiful. I'm so proud of what you've created." The livestream. I'd forgotten that Sophia had arranged for elderly relatives who couldn't travel to watch the ceremony online. Somewhere in Aventura, my grandmother was looking at Villa Esperanza through her computer screen, probably the only person watching who knew that her granddaughter had built this fairy tale with her own hands. I texted back, "Thank you, Abuela. I love you." "I love you too, Mija. Remember what I told you. Your grandfather would be so proud. Don't let anyone make you forget what you've accomplished." As guests continued to arrive and take their seats, I found myself watching them discover the space for the first time. I saw women whispering admiringly about the romantic fountain, couples taking selfies against the backdrop of climbing roses, older guests settling into chairs positioned perfectly to provide both comfort and an unobstructed view of the ceremony. Every positive reaction felt like a small validation of the vision I'd spent 5 years bringing to life. This was what I'd worked for. Not recognition or credit, but the simple joy of creating a space where people could celebrate love and happiness. The fact that my own family didn't know I was responsible for that joy should have mattered less than the joy itself. But it did matter. Standing there watching 300 people admire my creation while remaining completely invisible, I felt the familiar ache of being overlooked, underestimated, forgotten. I'd spent my entire life being the reliable one, the helpful one, the one who made things happen quietly while others got the credit and attention. Today was supposed to be different. Today, for the first time, they were going to see exactly who I really was. I just had to wait for the right moment. The ceremony itself was everything Sophia had dreamed of. She floated down the aisle looking like a princess. Marcus teared up when he saw her, and the vows they'd written themselves were heartfelt and genuine. As they exchanged rings beneath the restored fountain I'd spent months bringing back to life, surrounded by flowers I'd helped choose and guests seated in chairs I'd personally arranged, I felt a complex mix of pride and sadness. Pride because the ceremony was beautiful, because the space I'd created was providing the perfect backdrop for my sister's happiest moment. Sadness because I was watching it all from the back row, once again relegated to the margins of my own family's most important moments. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I mingled quietly with guests who praised the venue's beauty without knowing they were talking to its creator. I listened to conversations about the elegant architecture, the romantic gardens, the perfect ambiance, all while smiling and nodding as if I was discovering these things for the first time myself. Elena. Carmen appeared at my side, looking flushed with maternal pride and maybe a little too much champagne. Isn't this just perfect? The venue, the ceremony, everything? It's beautiful, I agreed. You know, I was talking to the venue coordinator, Miguel, and he mentioned that Villa Esperanza is actually owned by a local family. Someone with incredible taste who really understands how to create magical experiences. My heart started beating faster. Really? Yes, and apparently the owner is here today, somewhere among the guests. Miguel was being very mysterious about it, but he said we might get to meet them during the reception. Carmen's eyes sparkled with curiosity. I'd love to thank them personally for making Sophia's day so special. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a drop that would change everything. Miguel knew the plan. We'd discussed it weeks ago. During the reception, after dinner but before the dancing really got started, he would make the announcement that would finally reveal the truth about who had created this magical evening. That would be nice, I managed to say. I just can't imagine what kind of person has the vision and resources to create something like this, Carmen continued. They must be incredibly sophisticated. Probably someone with a background in hospitality or event planning. Maybe they studied in Europe or something. If only she knew. The person with the vision and resources was her younger daughter, who'd learned about sophisticated spaces from being excluded from them, who'd developed an eye for beauty from years of watching from the margins, who'd financed this dream by working 3 jobs while Sophia was in graduate school. You never know, I said quietly. As Carmen wandered off to mingle with other guests, I found myself standing alone near the edge of the reception area, watching my sister dance with her new husband while 300 people celebrated in the space I'd created for them. In a few hours, they would all know the truth. They would learn that the quiet sister they'd overlooked for 28 years was the reason they were able to celebrate in paradise. I just had to be patient a little longer. But patience, I'd learned, was something I'd been practicing my entire life, and tonight, that practice was finally going to pay off. The reception dinner was a masterpiece of coordination that unfolded exactly as I'd envisioned when planning Villa Esperanza's event capabilities. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandeliers I'd restored. Servers moved seamlessly between tables arranged in perfect harmony across the ballroom floor I'd personally refinished, and the acoustic design I'd carefully planned allowed conversation to flow naturally, despite the room being filled with 300 guests. I sat at table 12, strategically placed near the back where the family's distant relatives and family friends were seated. The table assignments had been Sophia's decision, and she'd grouped me with our great-aunt Maria, a few family friends I barely knew, and Marcus's college roommate's wife. It was the kind of placement that said, family, but not important family. Close enough to be included, far enough from the head table to be easily forgotten in the evening's festivities. "Elena, this venue is absolutely stunning," said Patricia, Marcus's college friend's wife. "How did Sophia find such an incredible place?" "Through research," I said carefully, cutting into the perfectly prepared filet mignon that my catering team had executed flawlessly. "She has good taste." "Good taste and good luck," chimed in Great-Aunt Maria, who'd been nursing her third glass of wine. "Places like this usually book years in advance and cost a fortune. Your sister must have some serious connections." If only they knew that Sophia's connections consisted of being related to the woman who'd spent 5 years transforming this abandoned estate into the most sought-after wedding venue in South Florida. The woman who was currently sitting at the back of the room, listening to guests praise her work while having no idea they were talking to its creator. From my vantage point, I could see the head table where Sophia and Marcus were holding court with the wedding party and immediate family. Carmen was in her element, glowing with pride as she accepted compliments about the venue choice and the perfect execution of every detail. She kept gesturing toward the room as if she'd personally selected every chandelier and arranged every flower. "The bride's mother has exquisite taste," I heard someone say as they walked past my table. "You can tell this family really understands elegance." I almost choked on my wine. Carmen's idea of elegance had always been expensive and obvious. Designer labels, flashy jewelry, the kind of luxury that announced itself loudly. The subtle sophistication of Villa Esperanza, with its carefully curated antiques and understated romance, was about as far from Carmen's aesthetic as possible. But she was happily accepting credit for choices she'd never made, for vision she'd never possessed. My phone buzzed discreetly with a text from Miguel. "Ready for the announcement? Kitchen says they'll start clearing dinner plates in 10 minutes. My hands trembled slightly as I typed back, "Ready." This was it. In 10 minutes, everything would change. The family who'd spent 28 years treating me like a useful afterthought was about to learn that their invisible daughter had been hiding in plain sight as the creator of their perfect evening. "Elena, you've been awfully quiet tonight," Patricia observed. "Are you okay? You seem nervous." "Just tired," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was exhausted from years of being overlooked, years of watching my family credit everyone except me for achievements I'd worked for, years of smile and nodding while they assumed I was incapable of creating anything remarkable. "Well, you should be proud," Great-Aunt Maria said, patting my hand with wine-loosened affection. "I know you helped with a lot of the planning. Sophia told me you were invaluable with all the little details. Little details, even my contributions that they did acknowledge were minimized, reduced to helping with little details, rather than coordinating, planning, and financially subsidizing the entire event. But in 10 minutes, they would understand that the little details they'd dismissed were actually the foundation of everything they were admiring." The servers began clearing the dinner plates with the synchronized efficiency I'd trained them to execute. Miguel appeared at the front of the ballroom, moving toward the small stage where the band had been playing background music during dinner. The moment I'd been anticipating and dreading for weeks was finally arriving. "Ladies and gentlemen," Miguel's voice carried clearly across the ballroom as he took the microphone. if I could have your attention for just a moment." The conversation gradually died down as 300 guests turned their attention to the stage. Sophia and Marcus looked curious, but not concerned. They probably assumed this was some standard venue announcement about the evening's schedule. "First, I want to say what an absolute pleasure it has been to host this beautiful celebration tonight," Miguel continued, his professional charm evident even from across the room. "Sophia and Marcus, your love story has been an inspiration to witness, and Villa Esperanza has been honored to provide the setting for your perfect day." Polite applause rippled through the room. Carmen beamed from the head table, clearly enjoying the attention and praise being directed toward her daughter's special day. "Now, many of you have commented tonight on the beauty of Villa Esperanza, and I know you're curious about the history and vision behind this magical place," Miguel said, his eyes finding mine across the crowded ballroom. "Tonight, we have a very special opportunity to hear directly from the person who saved this estate from demolition and spent 5 years transforming it into the venue you see today." The applause grew more enthusiastic. I could see guests looking around curiously, trying to identify who among them might be the mysterious venue owner they'd been speculating about all evening. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the owner and creative visionary behind Villa Esperanza." Miguel paused, his eyes locked on mine with an encouraging smile. "Ms. Elena Rodriguez." The silence that followed was deafening. 300 guests looked around in confusion, searching for someone they didn't recognize, someone who looked like their idea of a successful venue owner. At the head table, I could see Carmen's brow furrow in confusion, Sophia's mouth fall, open slightly, and Marcus lean forward as if he'd misheard. I stood up slowly, my legs steadier than I'd expected them to be. The blue dress I'd chosen specifically for this moment. Elegant, but not flashy. Sophisticated, but not showy. Suddenly, felt like armor. Every step toward the stage felt like walking through water, with 300 pairs of eyes following my movement and 300 minds trying to process what they were seeing. "That's," I heard someone whisper as I passed their table. "That's the bride's sister." "The quiet one," someone else added. "She was helping with details all morning." By the time I reached the stage, the whispers had grown to a low buzz of confused conversation. Miguel handed me the microphone with a proud smile, and I looked out at the sea of faces staring back at me in bewilderment. "Hello," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's carefully designed acoustics. "I'm Elena Rodriguez, and I want to thank you all for celebrating with Sophia and Marcus in my home tonight." The buzzing stopped. The silence was so complete I could hear the fountain outside through the open terrace doors. 5 years ago, I found this estate abandoned and scheduled for demolition, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. The fountain you watched Sophia and Marcus exchange vows beside was filled with stagnant water and broken concrete. The ballroom where you're sitting tonight had holes in the ceiling and pigeons living in the rafters. The gardens where you took photos during cocktail hour were overgrown with weeds and strangled by vines. I could see Carmen's face now, pale and shocked, her mouth slightly open as she tried to process what she was hearing. Sophia looked like she was seeing me for the first time in her life, her perfect composure cracking as the implications of my words began to sink in. "I bought this property with money I'd saved working 3 jobs while putting myself through business school," I said, the years of silent resentment finally finding their voice. "I spent 2 years learning historical restoration techniques, studying event planning, and slowly bringing this place back to life with my own hands. I replastered these walls. I refinished these floors. I cleaned and rewired every crystal in these chandeliers." The silence was broken by scattered gasps and murmurs as guests began to understand the magnitude of what I was telling them. The elegant venue they'd been admiring all evening wasn't just some lucky booking. It was the creation of the woman they'd barely noticed, the quiet sister who'd been serving them champagne and fading into the background. "Many of you have Asked tonight about the owner's vision, about what kind of person could create such a magical place, I continued, my eyes finding Carmen's across the room. The answer is someone who learned about elegant spaces by being excluded from them. Someone who developed sophisticated taste by watching from the margins. Someone who understood what makes celebrations special because she'd spent her whole life making other people's celebrations possible. I could see tears in some guests' eyes now, but they weren't tears of joy. They were tears of recognition, of understanding, of shame. How many of them had dismissed me tonight? How many had asked me to fetch drinks or handle problems, assuming I was part of the staff rather than the woman who'd made their magical evening possible? The accommodating price my family received for booking Villa Esperanza wasn't luck or desperation, I said, my voice steady despite the emotional earthquake happening inside me. It was me subsidizing my sister's wedding because I wanted her to have the perfect day she deserved. Every upgrade, every addition, every last-minute change that made tonight more beautiful. I absorbed those costs because I love this family, even when they can't see past their assumptions about who I am. Carmen was crying now, ugly tears that smeared her perfect makeup. Sophia looked like she was going to be sick, her golden complexion pale and stricken. Around the ballroom, guests who'd spent the evening praising the venue's elegance were staring at me with new understanding, finally seeing the woman who'd been invisible to them just moments before. I didn't reveal this truth for recognition or applause, I said, my voice softening slightly. I revealed it because I'm tired of being invisible in my own life. I'm tired of watching my family accept credit for achievements they didn't earn, dismiss contributions they didn't understand, and assume that quiet means incapable. I paused, looking around the ballroom one last time, at the restored ceiling murals I'd uncovered, at the gleaming floors I'd refinished, at the crystal chandeliers I'd brought back to life, piece by piece. Tonight, you've celebrated love in a space built by someone you overlooked. You've admired beauty created by someone you underestimated. You've enjoyed elegance designed by someone you assumed was ordinary. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. I hope that makes you think differently about the quiet people in your lives, about the ones who work behind the scenes to make your special moments possible. The applause started slowly, tentatively, from a table near the back. Then it spread, growing stronger and more sustained as guests began to truly understand what they'd witnessed. But I wasn't listening to the applause. I was watching my family's faces, seeing them grapple with the reality that everything they thought they knew about me was wrong. I handed the microphone back to Miguel and walked off the stage, not toward my assigned table in the back, but toward the terrace doors that led to the gardens I'd designed. I needed air, space, a moment to process what I'd just done. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of 300 conversations starting at once. Guests were processing what they'd learned, probably sharing their own moments of dismissing me throughout the evening, realizing how wrong their assumptions had been. But I wasn't interested in their belated recognition. I was interested in the future I'd just claimed for myself. Outside on the terrace, the evening air was warm and soft, carrying the scent of the jasmine I'd planted along the garden paths. The fountain I'd restored sparkled under the lights I'd carefully positioned, and the sound of water flowing over marble provided a peaceful counterpoint to the chaos I'd just unleashed inside. My phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother. "Mija, I'm watching on the live stream. I have never been prouder of anyone in my entire life." Before I could respond, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Marcus approaching, his face a mixture of awe and embarrassment. "Elena," he said softly. I don't know what to say. I had no idea. None of us had any idea." "I know," I said simply. "All those times I asked you to help with things tonight, all those times we treated you like—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Like the helpful sister?" I supplied gently. It's okay, Marcus. You were seeing what I'd trained you all to see. He shook his head. It's not okay. You created this incredible place. You made our wedding possible, and we treated you like you were invisible. You treated me like you always have, I said, not unkindly. The difference is that tonight I decided not to be invisible anymore. More footsteps approached. Carmen and Sophia appeared in the terrace doorway, both looking shell-shocked and uncertain. For the first time in my life, I held all the power in our family dynamic, and none of us quite knew how to navigate that shift. Elena, Carmen said, her voice barely above a whisper, why didn't you tell us? It was such a fundamentally wrong question that I almost laughed. When would I have told you, Mommy? Between the comments about how I'm not polished enough for important events, between the assumptions that I'm not capable of handling anything more complex than printing programs, when exactly should I have mentioned that I own one of the most successful event venues in South Florida? But we could have helped, Sophia said desperately. We could have promoted the venue, brought you business. I don't need your help, I said, and the words felt revolutionary. Villa Esperanza is booked solid for the next 18 months. I have a waiting list of clients who'd love to host their events here. I built this business without your help, without your connections, without your approval. I built it despite being told my entire life that I wasn't special enough to build anything remarkable. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of misunderstandings, dismissals, and missed opportunities for real connection. Finally, Carmen spoke again. Elena, I'm sorry. We're all sorry. We never meant to make you feel worthless, I finished. Because you did make me feel worthless. Every time you dismissed my ideas, every time you handed my work to Sophia to present, every time you introduced me as the practical one while calling her the talented one, you made it clear that you didn't see any value in who I actually am. Tears were streaming down Carmen's face now. We do value you. We've always valued you. You valued what I could do for you, I corrected. You valued my reliability, my willingness to handle problems, my ability to make your lives run smoothly. But you never valued me as a person with dreams and talents and the capability to achieve something extraordinary. We were wrong, Sophia said, her voice breaking. Elena, we were so wrong. This place is incredible and you're incredible, and I'm sorry we never saw it. I looked at my sister, still beautiful in her wedding dress, still the golden child, who'd never had to wonder if she was worthy of attention, and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a release of the anger I'd carried for so long. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. But apologies don't change 28 years of being overlooked. They don't erase the damage that was done. So what happens now? Marcus asked. How do we move forward from here? I looked back toward the ballroom, where 300 guests were probably still processing what they'd learned about the quiet woman they'd dismissed all evening. Then I looked at my family, really looked at them, perhaps for the first time as equals rather than as the people whose approval I'd spent my life seeking. Now we start over, I said finally. Not as the perfect daughter and the useful one, but as two women who happen to be sisters. Not as the family who overlooks Elena, but as people who are learning to see each other clearly for the first time. Can you forgive us? Carmen asked. I can try, I said, and meant it. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. Things are going to be different between us now. Different how? Sophia asked. I smiled, feeling the strength I'd discovered tonight settling into my bones like something that had always belonged there. Different because I'm not going to be invisible anymore. Different because I'm not going to minimize my achievements to make you comfortable. Different because I'm done pretending to be smaller than I am so you can feel bigger. As if on cue, Miguel appeared in the terrace doorway, Elena, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are several guests inside who'd like to meet you. Potential clients who are interested in booking events at Villa Esperanza. Business. My business. Built with my vision and my work, attracting clients because of what I'd created rather than what my family name could provide. It felt like validation and vindication rolled into one. I'll be right there, I told Miguel, then turned back to my family. Tonight was Sophia's wedding, and it was beautiful. Tomorrow, we start figuring out what our family looks like when everyone's contributions are valued equally. I walked back toward the ballroom, leaving them on the terrace to process what had just happened. Behind me, I could hear the music resuming, the dancing beginning, the celebration continuing. But I wasn't the same person who'd served champagne and faded into the background earlier in the evening. I was Elena Rodriguez, owner of Villa Esperanza, creator of magical experiences, builder of dreams made manifest. I was the woman who'd turned an abandoned estate into a fairy tale, who'd made her sister's perfect day possible through her own vision and sacrifice. And for the first time in my life, everyone knew exactly who I was. The quiet daughter had finally found her voice, and she was never going to be silent again. 6 months later, I stood in the same garden where Sophia had exchanged vows. But this time, I was the one wearing white. Not a wedding dress. I was still single, still focused on building my empire rather than finding someone to share it with. But a crisp white blazer over black pants, addressing a crowd of Miami's most influential event planners and hospitality professionals at Villa Esperanza's first annual industry showcase. When I bought this property 5 years ago, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying confidently across the assembled crowd of 200 industry experts. People told me I was crazy, a 23-year-old with no formal training in hospitality, no family connections in the industry, no safety net except my own determination. They said I'd lose everything trying to restore a property that had been abandoned for decades. The audience was different from Sophia's wedding guests. These were people who understood the business of creating magical experiences, who could appreciate the complexity of what I'd accomplished, not just as a creative vision, but as an entrepreneurial triumph. Among them sat journalists from hospitality magazines, venue owners from across the Southeast, wedding planners who'd been booking Villa Esperanza since I'd opened to the public 3 years ago. But here's what I learned during those 5 years. Of restoration, I continued, walking across the small stage Miguel had set up in the garden ceremony space. The people who tell you something is impossible are usually the people who've never tried to do it themselves. They're comfortable with limitations, their own and yours. Breaking through those limitations requires you to stop listening to voices that don't believe in your vision. In the front row, I could see my grandmother Rosa, who'd flown down from Aventura specifically for today's event. Next to her sat Carmen and Sophia, who'd been trying to rebuild our relationship with varying degrees of success over the past 6 months. The road to forgiveness had been complicated, filled with difficult conversations and painful admissions, but we were making progress. Villa Esperanza now hosts over 150 events per year, I said, clicking to the next slide in my presentation. We've been featured in 12 national publications. We maintain a 98% client satisfaction rating, and we've generated over $2 million in revenue since opening. But the numbers aren't what I'm most proud of. I clicked again, and the screen behind me filled with photos from dozens of different events. Weddings like Sophia's, but also corporate retreats, charity galas, intimate anniversary celebrations, quinceañeras, graduation parties. Each image showed people celebrating in the spaces I'd created, surrounded by beauty I'd brought back to life. What I'm most proud of is this, I said, gesturing toward the photos. These are moments that mattered to people. Celebrations that became memories, experiences that wouldn't have been possible without someone believing that abandoned things could be made beautiful again. The applause was immediate and sustained. These weren't people clapping out of politeness or family obligation. These were industry professionals recognizing genuine achievement, celebrating someone who'd succeeded in a notoriously difficult business through innovation and determination. After my presentation, the networking portion of the event began. I moved through the crowd, connecting with potential partners, discussing collaboration opportunities, fielding questions about expansion plans. This was the part of business ownership I'd had to learn through trial and error: how to be the face of my company, how to network effectively, how to command respect in rooms where I was often the youngest person and sometimes the only woman, business owner. "Elena, your transformation of this property is remarkable," said Diana Chen, owner of 3 luxury venues in Atlanta. "I'd love to discuss potentially partnering on some destination events. My clients are always looking for unique, Florida locations." "I'd be interested in exploring that," I replied, handing her my business card. The cards were simple but elegant: cream cardstock with gold foil lettering, my name and title clearly displayed, Elena Rodriguez, founder and CEO, Villa Esperanza Events. CEO. 3 letters that represented years of work, sacrifice, and belief in myself when no one else would. 3 letters that meant I'd built something substantial enough to employ 12 full-time staff members, something successful enough to expand into event planning services beyond just venue rental. "Ms. Rodriguez?" A young woman approached, hesitantly, notebook in hand. "I'm Jessica Martinez from South Florida Bride magazine. Could I possibly get a few minutes for an interview? Our readers would love to hear about your journey from unknown entrepreneur to one of the region's most sought-after venue owners." "Of course," I said, leading her toward a quiet corner of the garden where we could talk without interruption. As we walked, I caught sight of Sophia standing near the fountain, talking animatedly with 2 event planners who were clearly interested in her marketing expertise. The changes in our family dynamic over the past 6 months had been gradual, but significant. Sophia had started her own marketing consultancy, specializing in luxury hospitality brands. She'd asked to work with Villa Esperanza as a client, but I'd gently declined, not out of spite, but because I needed to maintain boundaries about what our professional and personal relationships could look like moving forward. Instead, I'd referred her to several other venue owners in the region, helping her build a client base while keeping our businesses appropriately separate. It was one of many small steps we'd taken toward rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. "So tell me," Jessica said, settling into one of the wrought iron chairs I'd placed throughout the garden for intimate conversations. "What was the moment you knew you wanted to transform this property into an event venue?" I thought about that question as I looked around the space that had become my life's work. "It wasn't a single moment," I said finally. "It was more like a gradual realization that I'd been preparing for this my entire life without knowing it. Every family event I'd coordinated, every detail I'd managed, every celebration I'd helped make possible. It was all training for this." "But surely there must have been doubts," Jessica pressed. "This was a massive financial and personal risk for someone so young." "Of course there were doubts," I admitted, "especially when people I trusted told me I was being unrealistic. But I'd spent so many years being told I wasn't capable of achieving anything remarkable that I became determined to prove them wrong. Sometimes the best motivation comes from wanting to show people what they missed when they underestimated you." As Jessica scribbled notes, I thought about all the people who'd dismissed my dreams over the years. The loan officer who'd initially rejected my application because I lacked experience in hospitality management. The contractor who'd tried to overcharge me because he assumed I didn't understand construction costs. The vendor who'd suggested I hire a more experienced event coordinator to handle my own venue's bookings. Each of those interactions had stung at the time, but they'd also fueled my determination to succeed. Every person who'd underestimated me had inadvertently contributed to my drive to build something undeniably successful. "What advice would you give to young women who are considering starting their own businesses?" Jessica asked. "Stop waiting? For permission, I said without hesitation. Stop waiting for someone else to validate your ideas or approve your dreams. Stop assuming that other people know better than you do about what you're capable of achieving. The biggest obstacle to success is often the voice in your head that sounds like everyone who ever told you to be realistic about your limitations. After the interview, I rejoined the networking portion of the event, energized by the conversations and connections happening throughout the gardens. This was what I'd envisioned when planning today's showcase. Villa Esperanza not just as a venue for celebrations, but as a hub for innovation and collaboration in the events industry. Elena! Miguel appeared at my side, practically vibrating with excitement. You need to come meet someone. David Harrison from Luxury Venues International is here, and he wants to discuss a potential acquisition opportunity. My heart stopped. For a moment. Luxury Venues International was one of the biggest hospitality companies in the country, known for acquiring unique properties and expanding them into luxury resort destinations. An approach from them could mean either the opportunity of a lifetime or the beginning of the end of my independence as a business owner. What kind of acquisition? I asked as Miguel led me toward a distinguished man in his 50s who was examining the architectural details of the ballroom entrance. Ms. Rodriguez, David Harrison said, extending his hand with a confident smile. I've been hearing incredible things about Villa Esperanza. Your reputation for creating exceptional experiences has reached our corporate offices. Thank you, I said carefully. Miguel mentioned you wanted to discuss an acquisition opportunity? Not acquisition in the traditional sense, David clarified quickly. We're not interested in buying you out. We're interested in partnering with you to develop additional Villa Esperanza locations throughout the Southeast. You'd maintain ownership and creative control, while we provide capital and operational support for expansion. The offer was staggering in its implications. Expanding Villa Esperanza from a single venue to a regional brand, creating multiple locations where I could implement my vision for elegant, historically inspired event spaces. It was the kind of opportunity that could transform my small business into a hospitality empire. That's an interesting proposition, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What would that partnership look like in practical terms? We'd like to schedule a formal presentation next month, David said, handing me his business card. But preliminarily, we're talking about identifying 3 to 5 additional properties throughout Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Historic estates or unique properties that could benefit from your restoration approach and event design expertise. After David moved on to network with other attendees, I stood in the middle of my garden, surrounded by the success I'd built from nothing, contemplating a future that could be bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. 6 months ago, I'd been the invisible sister serving champagne at someone else's celebration. Now, I was being courted by major hospitality companies who saw me as a visionary worth investing in. You look like someone who just received very good news, my grandmother said, appearing beside me with the quiet grace that had always made her seem like she could read minds. Maybe, I said, still processing David's offer. It's a big decision. The biggest decisions usually are, Rosa replied. But you've already made the hardest one. You decided to stop being invisible. Everything else is just details. As the afternoon wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself walking through Villa Esperanza one more time, seeing it not just as the culmination of 5 years of work, but as the foundation for whatever came next. Every restored detail, every carefully chosen piece of furniture, every perfectly positioned light fixture represented not just my vision made manifest, but proof that I was capable of achieving anything I set my mind to. Carmen approached as I stood in the main ballroom, looking up at the crystal chandeliers that had started this entire journey. Elena, today was incredible, she said softly. Watching you command that room, seeing all those important people treat you with such respect. I'm so proud of who you've become. I didn't become someone different, Mommy, I said gently. I just stopped hiding who I always was. I know that now, Carmen replied, tears in her eyes. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to hide. The apologies were easier to accept now. 6 months, after the initial shock of revelation had worn off. Carmen and I had been attending family therapy together, working to understand how our family dynamics had developed and how we could build healthier relationships moving forward. It was slow work, complicated by decades of ingrained patterns, but we were making progress. I have something for you, Carmen said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small wrapped package. I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a small silver picture, frame containing a photo I'd never seen before. It was from Sophia's wedding day, taken during the chaos after my announcement, showing me on the terrace talking to Marcus. But what made this photo special wasn't the setting. It was my expression. I looked confident, composed, completely comfortable with who I was and what I'd accomplished. Miguel took this, Carmen explained. He said it captured the exact moment you stopped being our Elena and became your own Elena. He thought you should have it. Looking at the photo, I could see what Miguel meant. There was something different in my posture, my expression, the way I held myself. It was the visual representation of a woman who'd finally claimed her own power and wasn't planning to give it back. Thank you, I said, meaning it completely. As the sun set over Villa Esperanza, painting the gardens in shades of gold and pink, I stood on the terrace where I'd confronted my family 6 months ago and thought about the future that was unfolding before me. The luxury venue's international opportunity, the continued growth of my business, the slowly healing relationships with my family, the respect I'd earned from industry professionals who saw me as an equal rather than an afterthought. But mostly, I thought about the young women who might be watching my story unfold, women who'd been told they were too quiet, too practical, too ordinary to achieve anything extraordinary. Women who'd been serving champagne at other people's celebrations while dreaming of hosting their own. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, the magazine journalist. Elena, just wanted to let you know that our feature story about you is going to be the cover story for our next issue. The headline is, From Invisible to Unstoppable: How One Woman Built an Empire from an Abandoned Dream. From Invisible to Unstoppable. It was a perfect summary of a journey that had taken 28 years to complete, but had been worth every difficult step along the way. The quiet daughter had found her voice, built her empire, and claimed her place at tables where she'd once served others. And this was just the beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.